Welcome to the Google Analytics course for bloggers. I'm really excited that you're here joining the course. I've been using Google Analytics at various levels for quite a while, and I'm really excited to be able to show you what I've been doing to help drive and analyze traffic to my websites. One of the things about being a blogger and affiliate marketer, also, if you're selling content online, is to really understand how the traffic gets there. Google Analytics is a really powerful tool that really can provide insight into your website or blog traffic. And it also provides immense value when you integrate it with other Google tools such as Google Ads or AdSense. Let's go ahead and find out more about why you may want to use Google Analytics to help identify trends and derive value from your content as quickly and efficiently as possible. Let's get started. Welcome to the Google Analytics Fundamentals course for bloggers. My name is Joseph Holbrook, and I'm really excited to be talking about Google Analytics. I've been using Google Analytics for quite a while, for a number of years, and one of the things that I have found to be very useful is to really identify areas of improvement and what's working and what isn't working. And I'll walk through Google Analytics from a technology expert's perspective, but also provide you that insight into reports and other areas of focus that would be really helpful for you to maximize your digital products. I'll also walk you through third-party tools that are available. Some of them I use, some of them I don't. I'm going to provide you the insight into these capabilities with Google Analytics to really provide that insight. So what are we going to really learn? We're going to talk about what is Google Analytics, why it's important. Talk about the fundamentals. And then we'll move on and talk about tags. We'll talk about terminology briefly. And also, the main focus will be on reports. That's what Google Analytics is really all about, is being able to run reports and identify trends, identify what's working and what isn't. We'll then proceed and talk about some of the advanced tools that are out there that you could use. We'll also talk about the solutions that are available from Google, such as Google Ads, AdSense, etc. We'll also talk about third-party tools such as DaVinci Code, etc. that can really provide great insight as well. Lastly, we'll go ahead and wrap it up with some other options that you could pursue for training and also certification if that's of interest. Then when it comes to the course schedule, we'll be taking this over a couple hours. Basically, we'll go through the overview. We'll go through the first segment. We'll then move on to the second segment. And then I'll also provide you some insight throughout the course. I have practice questions as well to really give you a good confirmation that you're actually learning some of the main points. And then we'll go ahead and close out the course. Really looking forward to going through the course with you and making sure that you understand how you could really get yourself enabled with Google Analytics. Now, we'll go through segment 1, which is about 50 minutes to an hour, and then we'll go through and talk about the analytics accounts, terminology, reporting, the console, of course. Most of the demos are really just focused on running reports and identifying trends, looking at data, trying to figure out the views that you want to look at, how to actually create value basically from your Google Analytics configurations. We'll then move on to the advanced topics. Now, when it comes to some of the other areas that I think are important, I'm going to focus on some of the tools that are out there, such as Table Booster, URL Builder, DaVinci tools, real-time tracking. We'll then get into basically looking at SEO opportunities as well. And then, of course, there'll be demos on different reports and how to look at them, mainly around acquisition, behavior, and conversions, right? It's all about that content and how is it converting. Then we'll talk about certification options, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up the course. And then throughout the course, we're going to spend most of our time in the console here talking about where the traffic's coming from, how to identify trends, how to go ahead and figure out where people are coming from, what they're looking for, everything that you'd really want to know. We'll go over to acquisitions, go over to Google Ads and campaigns. We'll look at behavior as well, and try to identify areas for you as a blogger that can really hopefully pick up your game and actually increase your revenue. Let's go ahead and talk about course prereqs. The main prereqs, of course, is to really just understand how to use Google Chrome. And of course, you need to have an internet connection. Now, the reason you need to use Google Chrome effectively is because most of the extensions for analytics is written in Google Chrome. And of course, it's a Google product. You would expect Google to want to promote their own browsers and solutions, and they do that via extensions in Google Chrome. So make sure you have that ready to go when you're going through the Google Analytics setup, configuration. Just use Chrome. And then when we go through the browser extensions, you'll see that they're only available in Chrome, at least most of them, so that you're able to use all the features and functions that are available with Google Analytics. Let's go ahead and move on to the next module. Welcome to Segment 1, Fundamentals of Google Analytics. In this segment, we're going to talk about the basics, the important areas that we really want to understand before getting into the deep dive on reports, how to derive value, how to identify goals, and areas like that, and also tools, etc., which we'll cover in the second segment. We want to talk about what metrics are and analysis. How does Google Analytics actually handle it? What's it look for? How is everything tracked? We'll talk about the cookies, etc. We'll also talk about the Java code, JavaScript code that is, and other areas that we want to know to understand how it's tracked from start to finish. I also have, as part of that, a whiteboard that I'm going to put together, and I'll walk you through how all this works as well. We'll be performing demos, of course, to reinforce what we're talking about. I am going to cover some brief terminology as well. These terms, such as sessions and users. Also, too, what is a bounce rate? Why is that important? These are some of the terms that we're going to run into that we really want to understand how it works in Google Cloud. Some other terms we're going to talk a lot about will be reports, dimensions, segments, campaigns, tags, areas like that. I'll talk briefly about the social media marketing framework and how you can tie in Google Analytics to that. Talk about digital products. As a blogger, affiliate marketer, I find it so important to understand what a product is doing and how it's doing and why it's doing it. And this is why we want to use analytics. We'll talk about reporting options and how to analyze reports. And then I'll talk about how to install the tracking tool. In other words, that snippet of code we're going to want to put on our website. I am going to walk you through how to install it on a WordPress site. That is fairly straightforward, so we'll go through that as well in a demo. I'm really excited to talk about Google Analytics, so let's go ahead and take off and get started learning about Google Analytics. What is Google Analytics? Well, let's go ahead and find out what Google Analytics is. We want to think of Google Analytics as really a service that is offered by Google. And basically, Google Analytics is really a free website analytics service that is going to give you insight into how your users find you and what they consume or view on your website. Now, with Google Analytics, it's about tracking your return on investment. It really is that simple. However, Google Analytics, again, is going to track and report, and it's really up to you to understand how all that's done. And that's why we're here. I'm here to walk you through the main areas that you, as a digital marketer, a blogger, a content creator, affiliate marketer, whatever your role is, to be able to understand what works and what doesn't. Now, Google Analytics is really part of a larger suite, and it's really part of that tool set that's called Google Marketing Platform. And I'm going to touch on what exactly is the marketing platform, what are the pieces and parts of it. Now, when it comes to Google Analytics, historically, it was actually bought from another company called Urchin. This is back in 2005. And there's two versions. We have Google Analytics, which is a free version. This is what most folks are going to be using. Unless if you're going to have massive traffic, you're going to require significant support, then Google Analytics is really probably what you need. And I'll talk about what the cutoff is basically for Analytics 360 versus Analytics as well when we get to that part of the course in much more detail. Now, what are the data types that are collected? There's really two main types. Now, we have basically acquisition data. This is where data is coming from, who's using it, and basically, again, it's really about the data. Basically, it's about how data is being referred to your website. That's really acquisition data. Behavior data is really more focused on what people are doing on your website and why they're doing it. So when they go to your home page, do they click this link or do they not? It also helps you identify, for example, what is really hot on your website and what is not. What are the links that works and what are the ones that don't? For example, some of the metrics we're going to be able to track are page views, unique page views, average time on page, and bounce rate is actually very important. I'll explain that as well. And then also too, when it comes to understanding your content, it also breaks down that into landing pages, exit pages, you name it. So much that could be looked at between acquisition data and behavior data as well. Now, when it comes to other types of data, again, we want to think about the data that's being collected with Google Analytics as mainly between acquisition and behavior data. However, we could also break it down as well into conversions, and we'll talk about conversions as well coming up. Now, what is the data model? When it comes to the data model, it's really focused on sessions and interactions. And again, this stuff is much more fun to look at in a demo, so I'll breeze over this. I won't bore you to death with PowerPoint, but basically just think about interactions as data collected when it comes to units of analysis. Interactions is more like page views. How does your customer or prospective customer view your website? Do they click there and stay on it for 10 minutes? Or do they go and select download the free PDF? Or do they select buy this now, right? This is all about what is the customer doing and how they're doing it. It's about really getting that information to be able to make what is really what I would call actionable insight decisions on what works and what doesn't. When it comes to data types collected, units of analysis, basically visitors, sessions, page views, events. And again, when it comes to the data types, we really can drill down into each of these quite remarkably in Google Analytics. Now, what is marketing platform? It's really a unified platform that Google created. It includes Google Analytics, Google Analytics 360, which is the enterprise version, Google Surveys, Google Optimize, Data Studio, Tag Manager, Display and Video, and Search Ads 360. Now, this is again a growing portfolio of services. I'm going to talk about each of those in the advanced section more in detail, so I'll hold off on that. Now, other services that you could use with Google Analytics: Google Ads, Google AdSense, Google Ad Manager. Also, too, let's say you're not thrilled with Google Analytics reports. You want to get better insight, deeper insight. You could use BigQuery, which is Google Cloud's basically version of basically a data warehouse. So you can go ahead and import your analytics data, ask questions against it. I'll have a demo on that as well as a bonus section. Firebase, if you're using mobile devices, Firebase is what you want to be on. And then G Suite, which is Google's basically software as a service for email, for Google Docs, etc. Now, let's talk about how it really works. How does this all come together? Now, this is really simplistic, really high level. I'll have a whiteboard. I'm going to put it all together from a blogger perspective or digital marketer perspective so that you can understand what you have to do, how it'll work, how you can actually bring things together, not just Google Analytics, but other services as well. The first thing that needs to happen is you need a user to want to go to your website. However you do that, it could be via a third-party site like Facebook or LinkedIn, it could be email, whatever that is. So the user has to send the request to go over to your website. That information is collected by international Google servers. They were located all over the world. These servers are Google Analytics servers, as they're called. Basically, they're in Google data centers, and they're collecting this information. And I'll explain how that happens when I go through basically in the course here coming up, how to track the data via the tracking code. But just think of basically over here, this is basically being tracked by what is called the GA tracking code, or tracking code simply put. So Google Analytics, what it does is tracks all of the data by a unique code. That unique code is tied to your digital product, your website. And that website has the code, and if it has the code, which is actually JavaScript, and that will allow basically Google to track what the user is doing, where they're coming from, etc. on your website and how they're getting there. The JavaScript code that's installed is really meant to identify from basically a cookie. And again, for the user to be tracked, they need to have a cookie. And the cookie is basically going to be on the visitor's computer. So basically the user says, I'm going to go to myblockchainexperts.org or .com, and it'll go ahead and track what I'm doing from here to the website. It'll go ahead and collect that information from the tracking code. It'll process that data on the Google servers. After it's on the Google servers, it then will be made available for you as a user to generate a report via the web console. With that said, that's really a high level of how it all works. Let's go ahead now to a whiteboard and really put this together, and I'm going to add a few things. I'm going to talk about, as a blogger, the different areas of focus that I have to help you sort of put together what you can do with your blogs. For example, are you doing affiliate marketing? Are you using funnels? Are you using ClickBank or any of those third-party services? I'll talk about Google Ads, AdSense as well. Are you getting revenue from YouTube? A lot of different things that you could really put together as part of your Google Analytics reports to really figure out what works and what doesn't. So let's go to the whiteboard and talk more about this. Let's go ahead and talk about how Google Analytics works from a technical perspective, like a workflow perspective. First thing that happens is that the user will go ahead on their browser and type in your website or search for a website. They'll click on the link or they'll go directly there. Well, basically there's a cookie that they're going to have as part of their web browser that'll pick up that request, and it'll go over to your website through DNS. Basically, it'll find you that way. And then your tracking code that you'll install on your website or blog will be picked up and will be referenced as a Google Analytics tracking code. Well, that information is collected from the user, such as their browser, such as the language of the browser, their IP address, where they're coming from basically, and other information is collected. That then is passed off over to the Google servers that will go ahead and collect this information through a database engine, and then will process these reports. When you log into Google Analytics, will request those reports in your dashboard. They'll be processed and then sent back to you to actually be viewed. That's essentially how analytics works at a high level from a technical perspective. Now, of course, there's a lot more to that in the back end, but for a typical webmaster or blogger, that's probably the extent that you'd want to know. Now, also note too, we could go in and add Tag Manager, Google Ads, and other products as well, actually, to be tracked as well as part of analytics. And I'll walk you through some of those demos on how to set up Tag Manager, for example. So that's really the workflow of the Google Analytics data collection. So first thing that happens, the user is going to request your website or find your website. Your information will be sent over to your domain. Your domain will be referenced, and when they go to your website, that tracking code will then be picked up. That tracking code is then going to be sent over to the Google servers, which then will process this information. And then when you, as the website administrator, the blogger, whatever your role is, will go ahead in and request those reports. That's 4. And then this would be 5. And then when you get back the reports would be essentially 6 steps from a processing perspective of the data. And that's the workflow. It really is that simple. And you as the webmaster, the blogger, etc., that's really all you need to worry about. So let's go ahead and move on. We have a lot more to talk about. Let's go ahead and now go through the Google Analytics dashboard. Now I'm over here in my home page. And when you first log into your account, you set it up, you're going to have basically a demo account. And then you will go in and then add snippets of code to your WordPress site or to your websites, whatever you may be using. Then you could also, of course, tie in YouTube as well, or funnels if you so choose. But with that said, let's go talk about the demo account first. And one of the things that you want to be aware of is that the analytics dashboard is fairly intuitive in some respects, but in some other respects, it may not be. So for example, when you click over here to home, and then you expand, you then would get your dashboards over here. But if I go back up to the master view and I select the master view again, this will go ahead and bring me back to the home page. And as you can see here, when I scroll down, there's all kinds of graphs and charts and links that are, basically showing you who's viewed what and when. Again, a lot of information into this little console. Now I could go over here to real time, and this will show me basically the number of users that are on the website at this particular time. This is test data that Google has provided for their merchandise store. And basically, I can go ahead and take a look at the top locations that traffic's coming from, top pages, etc. Could also view more about audience as well. It tells you basically language, country, browser, for example. What are people using? Of course, most folks are using Chrome compared to Safari or IE. Could go over here to Geo and look at languages. What are the languages that people are using with their browsers? Again, you could see that English, US, and then Great Britain and Spanish would be third. And again, a lot of things you can look at here. Now, when I go down to admin here, this is where I go in and look at the settings. This will tell us basically the account settings for the specific account that I am using. And we'll go through some of these settings throughout the course. Over here, property settings. Now, this is the tracking ID for Google Analytics. This is what you're going to want to use for your website. We'll go through how to set up your tracking code. Then over here, again, this is your tracking code actually over here. Go ahead and see this is the tracking ID for that site. This would be the website tracking code that you would actually install into your WordPress site, for example, or website. Then if we go back to the console over here, go back to the master view, you could see that I could go ahead and look at like revenue and conversion rate, number of sessions, traffic channels, for example. Where is the traffic coming from? Is it organic? Is it referral? Is it direct? Is it a paid search or other? Then I go over here to the acquisition report. And again, we'll go through a lot more of this in much more detail. I just want to do a quick walkthrough and identify areas that we're going to cover and some areas of interest typically to most students. Now, you go over here and you can see that this is printing out all the users. If I want, I could go ahead and actually segment this down and then also change, for example, based on goals. And I'll talk about what goals means and why it's important to have goals set up. And then over here, I could see how Google Ads is doing as well. For example, if you're using Google Ads and spending money on it, you might want to get insight into that. Let's go back over here to home. And now let's go over to one of my sites. Again, this is just a simple blog that I have. And again, you go over here, see the number of users, sessions. Again, traffic seems to have gone down. And then I go over to this site as well. And this is a little different. Again, it's just giving you a contrast of how activity could be very different. And with that said, it's all about understanding, for example, what people are looking for, how they find you, what exactly are you providing to your readers, to your customers, etc. Now, again, these blogs are very simple. They're just basically weekly blogs that I post. Not a lot of traffic, but it just gives you insight into what you can gain. Now, you could see, for example, the trends going up a bit there. That's really good to see. You could also see top countries, for example, US, India, United Kingdom, Japan. Also, interestingly enough, how does the viewers actually view the content? Is it mobile, desktop, or tablet? What are the pages that people are looking at? For example, this one here is about Kubernetes. That one there, for some reason, is one of my newer posts, but got the most traffic. I don't know why. It took me the less amount of time. It is what it is, right? So these are things that could be very useful for you to understand about traffic. Over here, when I do run campaigns, again, I could go over here and I could see, for example, for 118 clicks, it cost me about $100 or so to do that. Now, with that said, again, it's all about knowing what to look for. And I could go over here to real time. This will tell you the number of users that are on the website. You could see over here different times a day. Again, certain times a day gets more traffic than others. Then over here, locations tells you the US, for example. And you could also drill down to the state level as well. Now let's go to the audience as well. I could go find out more about the audience. And then acquisition, how did the traffic actually find it? Find your website. Over here, you could see that generally about 45% or so of the top channels are organic search. In other words, they're finding pretty much the website through Google or Bing or WordPress search. You could also see here that certain days had more users than others. Again, when you make a post, you generally would get more traffic. That's generally how it would work. Acquisition details, again, referrals from other sites. A lot of areas to really look at here. And then behavior. So let's go ahead and talk about this now. So you can see the number of page views over here, unique page views. The bounce rate, 0.59%. Again, you can see that it went up just a little bit, goes down. Exit rate is about 34%. And if I wanted to, and we'll go through some of these reports as well, is I could drill down into this and figure out, what exactly is going on. Why are they leaving that page over another page, right? So I go over here to page views. I could look at the bounce rate, page views, etc. Or I could go ahead and select another metric if I want. Now, if I scroll down here, I could go ahead and view a report of that. And I can also create another report if I want. I go ahead and look at different dimensions, look at different sorting types as well. You can see over here that this one page in just the last week or so had basically 26% of the views, basically. So again, why is that? That was a newer post that just had some interesting content, I guess, compared to what I would normally get. With that said, you could see that the bounce rate gives you the bounce rate for these different pages. You could see that some are higher than others. Exit rate is here, page value. Now, I don't have these pages monetized yet. Generally, I do a lot of affiliate marketing. I'm not using basically AdSense or anything at this time. But again, you could do that. Absolutely easy to set up as well. Conversions. Now, for example, here, if I was using, for example, specific pages, I could look at the conversions for those as well, set those up. I go back to home now. And if I go over here to sessions, you can see I could break down the number of sessions, the bounce rate. Again, I could dive into that. And then the session duration. How long is the average user, basically viewing the website? Again, not a lot of time, right? It's a simple blog. It's not meant to be trying to be interactive or anything. But again, these are things that you'd want to do when you start getting funnels put in place. If I go over here to audience overview, this will go ahead and bring over new visitors, 81% versus about 18%. So that's pretty good. I'm getting new traffic. Again, this is a fairly new blog, less than 3 months or so. So not bad traffic considering the fact that it's all really organic traffic. And you could see, for example, countries, if I go to countries versus language, most of the visitors are from where? The United States. Second country would be India, United Kingdom, United Kingdom was the third, so on and so on. So you can see that it gives you that country list. What about city? Again, not set. Now, sometimes when you get like the not set, that just means that that IP address that is being tracked is not tied to a specific IP, or it's basically going through like a known NAT proxy or firewall in some cases. Could also be that it's going through, for example, if you're on an airplane searching, for example, that would come back as not set. It wouldn't come back as Delta Airlines or something, right? So you could see there that these are the cities that most of the traffic is coming from. Interestingly enough, it's always interesting to see what are people viewing the site on. Well, actually, there's more Android users than iOS users, for example. Service provider. So you could see that, again, broken down, the top 5 service providers are listed here. AT&T, again, depending on location, Emirates, Comcast, Reliance. Again, I'm not sure where some of these are, but you could drill down and actually figure that out as well. Now let's go back up here to home again. And let's talk about admin. Now, under the admin, again, I showed you that a little bit earlier. Now, when you sign up for Google Analytics, we're going to go through a demo of pretty much all of the important areas to get your site set up, for example. We won't go through every little detail here, but we're going to go through, for example, how to set up your properties, your tracking info, how to copy and paste it into your site, etc. Now, when I go to create an account, I could create a new account and go ahead and set that up and measure, for example, specific areas that I might want to measure. I could also go down over here and link up my AdSense, for example, as well, and then Ad Exchange. Again, if I'm using that, I'm not using that at this time. And then Google Ads. Again, this is my account for Google Ads over there. And then last, if I go back home again, one of the things that you might want to also look at is when you go over here, you could see up over to the top left, over to the right, that you have these icons. Well, we have analytics here. Now, remember, this is all part of the Google marketing platform. So we have Tag Manager. Now, Tag Manager is going to be something you're going to want to use typically for larger sites, corporate sites. There's a cost to using these services. Optimize is something that could be used as well. And basically, when you're using Optimize, you go ahead and create basically personalized experiences. And as part of that, it's going to collect that additional information and try to identify what users like and how do they react to that experience. Basically, if you change a color on your website, do they click more than if it was red or orange, for example? And again, that's just one of the areas that you might want to look at. And then Data Studio. So Data Studio is really cool. You go over here and derive some really great insight into your reports that you're creating. And again, a lot of it seems like it's hanging up here for some reason. But anyways, we'll go into that, dive into that throughout the course. So there it is. And you can see that there's different reports that were created. And you have the ability to start with a template. Now, why would you want to create a different report in Data Studio? Well, because, for example, you may want to be able to make your reports more interactive. You may want to send them, for example, if you have a digital agency, you may want to send them to your customers or to your corporate leadership, whoever that may be, marketing, so on and so on. And then lastly, we also have surveys. Now, surveys is exactly what it sounds like. This, again, is a cost to do that. You go ahead and create a survey. And again, it's basically creating questionnaire, and there is a cost. I think it's like $1 per survey question. And when you confirm the survey, it tells you what the cost is. And this is tied into Google Analytics and actually the marketing platform. So when you send out a survey, like instead of using SurveyMonkey, where the data that is being collected doesn't go directly to you, this is going to go directly to you so that you can analyze it. And that's actually really cool. So I'm going to walk through that as well. So that, I think, is a good overview of analytics. We're going to dive deeper into most of these areas throughout the course. We're going to run a lot of reports. We're going to be looking into, again, how to identify patterns. We could also add segments. For example, a segment we may want to create where we want to make sure that we're only looking at specific types of data. And again, I can go ahead and choose a segment based on specific criteria like demographics, language. And that way, instead of like looking, for example, at a report like this that has all the data sort of put together in one, I go ahead and create a specific type of view and weed out data that I don't want and keep data that I want. It's really that simple. All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about a few more things and then we'll move on. Now, also, if we go up here, we have our notifications over here. And then we could save, for example, reports. So when we create a report, we would save them, name them whatever we want. Could also share reports as well as an attachment. And I'll walk through that as well. And then we have Insight. And I'll talk about analytics intelligence. Now, this is actually really cool, for example, because it'll give you some insights. And when you click these insights, it gives you that information. Basically, it'll go ahead in and tell you, for example, 606 users in September came back. That means 4.9% of my users returned to my website. Now, is that great? No, not really. But again, I'm not doing email marketing or anything on this site, so it's not a big deal. It's more of, again, just passive income is the way I look at it. Now, what about if I go over here? This compares new users to returning users. So let's go back over here and look at one more thing. So when I scroll down, content analysis, what are my top pages? And it's going to go ahead and point that out. And then I go and create a report based on that. And again, identify what pages are getting traffic and which ones may not be getting traffic. Also, too, how much time are they spending there, etc. What's the bounce rate, the exit rate? A lot of great information. Let's go ahead and continue on now. We have a lot more to look at in the dashboard. I just want to do a quick little overview of Google Analytics. As you can see, there's a lot there. So let's go move on right now to the next module. Let's talk about some review questions, see what we are learning and retaining. First one, what are the two main types of data that are collected? The answer is user acquisition and behavior. Next one, which of the following are true statements about Google Analytics? Well, again, Google Analytics is a web analytics service offered by Google. That is true. Basically, Google Analytics tracks and reports your website traffic. And there's also, of course, 2 versions, and we want to know what those versions are. And if you guess those, you're correct. Last question. Which units of analysis are not automatic and requires code to be added to your website? Basically, there's one specific answer here for us to track events, in other words, triggers. We need to have the additional code loaded onto our website, not just the analytics tracking information. The basic analytics tracking information is going to track visitors, sessions, pages, and sites. Let's go ahead and move on. Good job if you answer them correctly. What are metrics and analysis? Before we talk about the types of metrics and the analysis approaches that Google Analytics uses, let's just make sure we know what the real definition of metrics really is. And also, too, what are some important attributes of metrics? Now, the book I'm referring to is called Lean Analytics. That's pretty much the de facto standard when it comes to metrics and deriving value from the metrics that you are looking at, analyzing, digesting, etc. Basically, when it comes to the author's view in Lean Analytics, it's really a comparative approach so that you understand where you are compared to your competitors or past performance. Another way I like to describe this is that you have a baseline to look at and you could compare. Secondly, it's understandable so that you can communicate it for acceptance. In other words, when we get a report and we're looking at that report and it shows that at a certain time of day we're getting 4 times the hits, we should be able to have a report that should be able to plainly state that something's going on at that time. Whatever it is, we'll need to look into it, but basically we need to be able to get that point across to someone else very clearly. It's also relevant. In other words, you want to be able to take that data and drive action from it. In other words, your analysis should be actionable. Also, too, one of the points that they make in the book is ratio versus rate. That's one of the comparable point of views that they have that I found really interesting. So how many times does it happen? And also, what's the rate of it occurring? For example, what are the time of days? What's the percentage that it happens on that time of day? Is it on certain days or every day? These are things that we want to look at. Now, for those that want to look at the book more in detail, it's, of course, on Amazon. But if you're a member of O'Reilly, then you could view it for free as well. And I'm sure there's other websites that if you're a member, you could view it as well for free. But again, the book is available fairly inexpensively on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. So let's go ahead and continue on and talk about metrics now in the world of Google Analytics. Let's go ahead and talk about reports. Now, there's actually really only 5 high-level reports. They are real-time, audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversions. So let's talk about real-time first. Real-time reports are essentially real-time data. And when I select real-time data and go to the overview, you can see right now I have 2 active users. And when I scroll down, I can see that I have 1 user there. And then if I look at the world map, it's probably, of course, coming from another location. You can see that my top social traffic is coming from LinkedIn, directly from that LinkedIn post because I just posted it. And I could see that people are looking at some of the posts that I had posted recently on LinkedIn. Now, what's nice is I go to locations and you can see that there's actually 1 active user now, and it looked like 1 user probably just dropped off. And actually, it looks like Bolivia, but I don't see that lit up. That's really interesting. So there's actually 2 users, 1 in Bolivia, 1 in the US at the time that I'm showing this demo. So real time is really about you identifying where traffic's coming from at that time that you're looking at it. Talking about the content that people are interested, talking about conversions that might occur, letting you know, is it traffic coming from Facebook or Instagram, or is it coming from a referral source like medium.com, whatever that is. So that's a real-time report. We'll talk more about those coming up. And then we have audience reports. So the audience reports is basically who has viewed your website. It's really that simple. It identifies who basically looked at your website and gives you that information into the demographics that might be important to you. For example, here I could view the country the city, the language as well. You can see the language is, of course, English is a major factor, and this is basically showing the browser type. Now, if I select country, this will show me that the top countries for viewing my blog posts are actually, right now, it's India. And so that's an interesting change from what I looked at last week. And again, it's all about the post. So if you're a blogger or you're selling content online, this is really important to understand because you want to get the best return for your time and for your investment. And we have to know who is actually our audience. And this really should help you with that. And then also, too, what about, for example, operating system? This will tell you, for example, that 94%, or actually say 94 users and 68% of my users are using Android. And only about 31% are actually focused on iOS. And that's basically the devices that they're coming from. So that's really interesting to see because that does sort of change from time to time. Now, we go over here and look at active users. Now, again, you go ahead and look at that. Today, there's been 163 active users today. In the last week, there's been 380. And again, 14 days, 638. So you can see that that's a pretty significant uptick over here. And again, I just posted a simple blog post that apparently drove a lot more traffic than what I would have expected, which is great. This is something that I can learn, understand the content that people are really interested in. And then again, you go down here and look at various sections of the audience. For example, demographics, overview again. And this tells you, for example, that from a key metric perspective, here's the age groups of how the audience is broken down. Interestingly enough, being a Gen Xer, being about 50 years old now, I'm not really getting the same interest from my age group, but for some reason, most of my traffic is coming from the 25 to 34 age group, which is quite interesting. Over here, it is, of course, mainly male, 86%. Then I could actually go over here. The key metric is users. And then let's say I want to look at, for example, site usage. What age group is actually using my site more than others? So let's just double check and look at, for example, average session duration. And as you can see, the age group does matter into the length of the view time on your site. So this is really interesting. 25 to 34, just under 2 minutes. But then when I look at the age group 35 to 44, the average duration is just under 3 minutes. And again, I don't have a good explanation as to why. It just appears that for some reason, this age group is more interested in my content per se. So I have a higher number in this age group, but this age group actually spends more time. Again, things that you're just learning, just trying to figure out your audience. When you start a new blog, when you start a new e-commerce site, whenever you're trying to start some kind of online presence, it's really just trying to understand your audience. And this is a really good way to start doing it. That's the second type of report. Let's talk about acquisition. How did folks get to your website? How did they find you? Basically, again, it's all about understanding where people are coming from. You can see here that about 33% of the traffic is organic search. That is simply going to Google search or Bing or any other search engine. They're able to find me basically 33% of the time based on that. Now, you can see over here, direct. 114 users directly just type in my website to find it, which is sort of interesting. And then social, 82 users, about 21%. And again, really interesting statistics for me to really understand because, again, it's more of a game changer if I could understand where they're coming from and where I should be spending my marketing funds and what what kind of results am I getting from my SEO, for example. Never mind the posts that I put on, for example, LinkedIn, Facebook, or any other site for that matter. So it really just comes down to understanding where the traffic's coming from, what channels really are worth your time, what areas of focus could use more attention. Again, it's all about getting return when you post or you sell your content online. It's really about that. And from an affiliate marketing perspective, I've also noticed that some affiliate channels that I use are just not doing as well as they used to be. And again, it's more just trying to understand what exactly is going on and why. And then if you go down here, you can see again, it's broken down into acquisition, behavior, and conversions. You can see that the direct traffic seems to have a little bit more interest than people just clicking from the social sites, for example. And then again, if I was using Google Ads, my campaigns, I haven't done too much on it. You can see that there isn't much of a return. And again, this is just over a short period of time. Like if I click a month, again, not much going on. I think I did about literally a week of advertising, like 2 months at first. I didn't totally get much of a return, but if I go back here to August 1st and then apply, you can see that I did some minor ad campaigns. I didn't find the amount of money I spent to be worth the drive, but again, this is something that you could look at. I'm still figuring that out. I think, again, until I start selling direct content that I build directly for, that's when it will start making more sense. Now, we'll go back to acquisition and talk more about that. The next report is the behavior report. Well, this is more focused on basically what did they actually do, what did they click, and how did they get to certain pages. When they arrived, what was the results? Now, this is, again, something that you might want to look at. When I look at all pages, again, you could see that, for example, here, page views would go up and down, and that's the result of posting a new post. That's pretty evident. And then again, you could see most of the views are going to the home page, which is a direct result of the organic search mainly. And then you could see that again, that people somehow like to have free practice questions. And again, the goal is to change that from free, have some free, and then have some paid. Now, that's a behavior report. Now, conversions is basically how did I convert? Now, this page here, again, when you set up your goals, and I'll walk you through setting up the goals. For example, it's really fairly straightforward. And you really want to set up goals, especially when you're selling something online. You have like a click funnel, basically. That's really what that's all about. So did they buy something? Did they spend money? Or did they click an affiliate link? That's really what I really want to track. So those are the 5 types of reports. And then lastly, there's custom reports as well. That's really a combination of all these reports. You could pick and choose and create a report that fits your needs. So let's go ahead and move on to the next module, and I'll get deeper into each of these reports throughout the remaining part of the course. Let's talk about some terminology that we're going to run into in Google Analytics. Now, one of the things to be aware of is that some terms are probably straightforward, but some are not as straightforward as they would seem. For example, users and sessions would sound fairly straightforward, but in reality, the way Google Cloud measures these may not be as straightforward as you may think. For example, users are the number of unique individuals that visit your website. Now, be aware that if a user, for example, is on a Windows machine using Chrome, but then that same user decides to view it on their iPhone or iPad, that's considered 2 different users. So just be aware of that. Now, when it comes to sessions, that's going to be the period of time a user is actively viewing your website. So for example, the session is really more of an engagement period, is the way I like to look at it. Now, new sessions are an estimate of the first-time visits from specific users. The average session duration is the time spent on all pages. For example, what will happen is Google Analytics is going to look at all these numbers, basically your average time, sessions, users, etc., bounce rate, and basically average everything in. And that'll be your average session duration. Average time is really focused on a page. So what you would do, and again, we're going to do all this in the demo and drill down and look at this stuff, but basically just be aware that the average time is the amount of time on a specific page, not your website. The bounce rate is perhaps the most confusing typically. So what is the bounce rate? Simply put, the bounce rate is really a session where a user goes to your website and does nothing. Basically, look at a page and then they'll click another page. And that's considered a bounce because Google Analytics, the way it's calculated, is going to look at a few different variables. But basically, the main thing is does the user click on a link on your web page? Does it click on a video? Does it click on a digital product? And if it does see that activity, then that's good for your bounce rate. If it doesn't, then your bounce rate will not be as favorable. So the bounce rate technically is a metric that measures the percentage of users that land on your website and do nothing. Basically, if they don't click anything, that basically increases your bounce rate. A user bounces basically when there's no engagement is another way to look at it. So the bounce rate is going to indicate the quality of your content basically. Could also be your audience as well. And I'm going to go through the demo on this here coming up very shortly, so you'll see it in action. But basically, it really should help you identify to see if you're engaging with your users or not. And I'll talk more about bounce rate, how it's calculated, how it affects SEO, stuff like that. Now, one thing to point out is if you have a high bounce rate, though, it generally means one of typically two or three things. It could be the quality of your content, you're not finding the right audience, or maybe you just gave the users all the information they need and they don't have to look anywhere else. Lastly, the last two terms I want to cover is the exit rate. This is basically going to be the number of users that are ending their session basically after viewing a specific page. And this is really important really for folks that have landing pages or selling basically through a funnel to really understand what works and what doesn't. Pages per session basically is the average number of page views in a single session. So that's really the basic terminology I want to cover before we got into the demos and the deeper content. So let's move on. We have a lot more to cover. All right, well, one review question here. Which of the following term is Google's approach to tracking single page sessions? Now, try not to get confused between the bounce rate and the exit rate, or even sessions in some cases. The correct answer is a bounce rate. Now, why is it the bounce rate and not the exit rate? Well, the exit rate tracks basically the amount of times that users leave a specific page. The bounce rate is what? Really tied to a single page session. Someone lands on your site, doesn't go anywhere. Exit rate is really where they've already been on your site and they leave your site because of a general reason, whatever that is. It could be a checkout. It could be a landing page, whatever it is. That's generally where we want to look at the exit rate. So let's go ahead and move on and continue to the next module. What is social media marketing, and what is a framework that generally you want to follow? Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that there's numerous frameworks, and there's probably 15 to 20 different social media frameworks that are out there. There's no right or wrong ones. I'm just choosing this approach because this is what I feel works for me as a blogger, as a content marketer, affiliate marketer, etc. Now, again, it's up to you to figure out what might work in your case. But what I want to do is walk through each of these quickly and give you an idea how Google Analytics can help you around these 5 areas of social media marketing. Because here's the challenge. We can post our content on our websites all day long, but if we're not on social media, then we're not attracting new visitors to our website. Now, of course, there's organic search, no question about it, and there's indexing, but it doesn't usually do enough. We want to drive the traffic and understand what our users, our followers, are looking for. When it comes to planning, we want to know what exactly is the product we're going to market and how we're going to market it. Planning also entails identifying, for example, KPIs and metrics that we want to measure. For example, what is the user base? How do we basically scale our business? How do we identify different types of traffic? For example, LinkedIn is very different than Facebook or Instagram, for example. Now, when it comes to building, it comes down to really understanding our customers in the market, but also what are the channels we're going to use? What are the areas of focus we're going to focus on when it comes to building our digital products or our affiliate marketing strategy? Reporting. Again, reporting is really what we want to use Google Analytics for as one of those areas in social media marketing we want to absolutely use. So reporting is what? Reporting is coming down to the bare facts of understanding what we have to look for and how we want to derive value. Basically, the way we create the report in Google Analytics will provide us the report types that we need. For example, if we want to analyze and also interpret, for example, a digital product on our website, on a Shopify site, or whatever funnels we may be using, we need to be able to understand what are the metrics that can be tracked and how those metrics will allow us to see the exact activity that's going on. Now, when it comes to forecasting, again, Google Analytics can provide that insight in that approach where you can look at the graphs and the charts and determine, is traffic going up? Is it going down? Are there certain days? For example, if you're a retailer and you want to go ahead and announce a new product on a certain day of the year that might be really heavy traffic, you can forecast that it might be busier that day. And because of that, you may need to scale up your resources, whatever that entails on your web platform. Then optimizing. This is where we're continually optimizing our reporting, our forecasting. We're also more than likely optimizing our planning and building, where we're actually going out there and understanding what our KPIs are and changing those as needed. We need to also understand our customer base can change as well. Now, with that said, there's certainly a lot more that can go into this, But I just want to touch on these before we got started to realize that Google Analytics can absolutely help you in different parts of a social media marketing framework. It really does wonders for your comprehension of how your investment is actually performing. So let's go ahead and move on to the next module. Let's talk about digital products. What exactly is a digital product? Well, a digital product is really anything that's an electronic format that you could go ahead and give away or sell online. Now, generally, this is anything from music to ebooks, courses, photos, software, hosting services, games, and applications. My focus has traditionally been in ebooks, courses, and even hosting services when it comes to basically affiliate marketing or even direct sales as well. So let's go ahead and move on to the next module. Let's go ahead and talk about reporting. Now, when it comes to reporting, we want to really understand the different options and how to look at reports. Generally, there's two really specific type of reports. Basically, we have standard and then we have custom. And as you would expect, standard is essentially the pre-packaged, pre-templated reports. And then custom are the reports we're going to create based on the metrics that we're looking at. So when it comes to the two type of reports, the standard reports are essentially our templates. They're preset reports. Those are the ones you see when you log into the dashboard for the first time, for example. Those are going to be broken into segments. Those segments of the standard reports are real-time, audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversions. I'm going to be going through each one of those in detail in the demos, so hold on tight. We have a lot more to talk about. Now, custom reports are exactly what you think they are. You go in and you select the metrics that you want to look at. You want to filter. You could also look at different segments, and you could create different views. You have the ability to adjust the output. You could change, for example, the charts. You go ahead and change from a pie chart to any other type of chart that you want to look at. That's really the usefulness of a custom report. Custom reports are really important, especially when you want to dive down into a larger site and filter out areas that may not actually be helpful for you to look at to actually identify areas that you could improve on or identify what are the landing pages that are really driving the traffic. Let's go ahead and talk about a review question before we move on. Which of the following is not a preset report? And the answer is aggregation. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's go ahead and talk about creating a dashboard. Now, dashboards are basically a collection of widgets, and widgets are basically a view of the metrics, also possibly reports that we want to create. So what we want to do is pay attention to the account we're in, first of all, and then go to customization, go to dashboards. And you can see I have a dashboard here. I go over here and select that dashboard. And you can see that I have all users and organic traffic. I have this set up into two. And I could create a new widget as well that basically could highlight, for example, just mobile traffic. And then when I do that, it'll also give me that insight into just mobile traffic. And I could go over here. Let's say I don't really like these line charts, for example. I could go over here and change my view to a bar chart, a table, a pie chart, whatever I feel like doing. And then I could also, for example, add a dimension if I want as well. Like, for example, let's say here, browser type. And then I go ahead and save that. And you can see when I'm looking at the users by browser type, that Chrome is by far the most widely used. Then I go over here to sessions. Look at all of these nice little details. Now, let's say I want to create a new dashboard. What I want to do is I could go back over here to the dashboards, and then what I want to do is go select create. And if I want, let's say I want to get more of a detailed, customized dashboard just for a specific use case. Go over to import from gallery. This is where we want to go to get pre-configured dashboards for the specific categories that we might be looking at. If you're new to analytics, go over to Analytics Academy, and they have, for example, a few different examples that might be of use for you. And then over here, for example, if you're looking for mobile beast dashboards, you could see here that they have a few available. Now, I'll be honest, some of these don't really reflect the categories that they're in. However, some of them may actually be useful. What I want to do in this demo is go to the starter dashboard, though, and I'm going to go ahead and call this new dashboard, just so that it's clearly obvious when we go to the list again here. Now, when we create a new dashboard, we can go ahead in and customize our widgets. For example, I can go over here. Let's say I want to look at the users in more of a pie chart, and I go ahead and group users in whatever category or categories make sense to me. And I could show it up based on any number of slices if that makes sense. I go ahead and save that. I could also add a dimension. So for example, users, and then actually let's say I want to look at the app version or browser, for example, and then go ahead and save that dashboard. And you can see that that'll change that over, and it highlights, for example, clearly that 70% of the users are on Chrome, for example. Now, I go over here to sessions, change that. I go ahead and change that from a geo map to a table if I want. And then I go ahead and save that, and you can see that that prints out by country. And you can see, for example, US, India, Singapore, Brazil, UK, and it places the countries in order so you could see directly where your traffic's coming from. Also, this is broken down into mobile and organic traffic. Now, I could add another widget if I want. And let's say I have, for example, content on my site that I'm selling, like an ebook or a course. I go over here, and I would just go over here, whoever, and this is, of course, part of something that you might have in a pipeline as well. And so what I want to do is just go ahead and apply that. And then I would have basically an additional widget for me to look at as well. Now, again, goal completions. Now, I'll talk about goals in the course. Those are really important. And then this would highlight the revenue. Now, of course, I'm not on this site here. I'm not, using a Shopify site or anything. I'm not selling anything directly on this site, so it's not going to show anything. But basically, again, you can see you go ahead in and add widgets and customize those widgets as needed. Then if I go over here, I can create my own widget and, of course, go through the same exact process. And lastly, I can go over here to delete the dashboard as well. And when I delete it, you can see that that disappears now. With that said, it's really easy to create a dashboard. Let's move on. Well, now that we've created a dashboard and we know how to do it, what we want to do is, let's say we want to go ahead in and have this dashboard insight sent to someone else, or we want to template it, share in the gallery. We go ahead and do this. We could also export it as well. And what we could do is go over here to share, and we could share this as an object. We could share this as a template link if we want. We could send this as an email or in a chat as well, instant messenger. We could also email this. So if I want, I could email myself in this case. I could also do this on a weekly basis where I get insight and I could select the day, the time, whatever is appropriate. I could say, for example, this is my weekly report. You do need to select You're Not a Robot. And also, too, advanced options, we have the ability to keep this active for whatever length of time is appropriate. And then I go ahead and send. And that'll go ahead and send a report to that email. Now, I could also export this off to a PDF file as well. And that'll go ahead, create a PDF file. And it may take a minute to come up. It just depends on the workload and the time of day. And it is a cloud, so you just never know. And there it is. And there is my report of the dashboard. So if you have your boss asking about what people are doing on the site, or you as the content owner may have just changed your website around, you want to see how it's performing, or you're selling something on the website like an ebook or a course or merchandise, this will, of course, provide that insight in an easy-to-read format that's emailed to you directly. With that said, that's really easy to set up as well. I encourage you to do that to get that weekly insight, monthly insight, whatever you're actually looking for. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the admin panel. When you first set up your account and you log in, what you want to do is go down here to the admin panel, and you can see that we have three subsections. We have basically the account, we have property, and we have view. Now, basically the account settings is where we're going to adjust our user management, any kind of information about our accounts, such as contact information, etc. We could set up filters as well. And then over here under properties, we could go ahead and set up our settings for our account. Also, too, we go over here and change your tracking information. When we go through the demo on setting up an analytics account, I'll go ahead and walk you through the tracking info. Over here, we get set up our ad linking, for example. This has been set up, AdSense as well. And then over here, Ad Exchange, if I was using that. And then I am using Optimize as well. That's been set up as well. And then lastly, when it comes to the view, this is where we would go and take a look at views that have been set up, such as goals, I should say. We go over here and edit our channel settings. If we're doing e-commerce, this is where we'd want to turn on additional tracking information. And then we could set up our segments and other tools that might be useful, such as saving reports, for example. You can see that there's one here. Scheduled emails. I have an email that sends me an update every Friday with a special report to identify basically pages that are sort of giving me the most traffic. So that's really the admin panel. When you first start setting up analytics, this is where you're going to spend a good amount of time at first. So let's go ahead and move on. We have some more demos coming up. Now, if you have not signed up for a Google Analytics account, what you should do is go over to Google, type in Google Analytics, sign up or sign in, and it'll bring you over here. What you want to do is go select Create an Account, and then again, if it's for you or your business, go ahead and select Myself. What you want to do is fill this in, go through the process, complete it. There's a verification process you have to go through. They're going to text you something to your cell phone. Once you're done with that, you're going to be good to get into analytics. Then what you want to do is go over to analytics, sign in, and it'll bring you over to the dashboard. Now, of course, you won't have any data collected yet. What you want to do is go over to admin, because what we have to do, of course, is get your tracking information, which is going to be basically JavaScript that we're going to add to your WordPress site. So go over to admin. We want to go over to tracking info. Now we want to select tracking code. This is the global site tag. You're going to copy and paste that information. Go over to WordPress. What you want to do now is realize there's a couple different ways to do the same thing generally, depending on your WordPress provider. Now, if you're using Bluehost or you're using HostGator, Network Solutions, whoever that provider is, they may have a slightly different interface. So I can't control that. But the main area that you probably want to go to first is go over to Settings. Select Insert Headers and Footer. Now, that Insert Headers and Footer is actually a plugin, though, you have to add. So you need to know how to add a plugin to go ahead and install the tracking code. Now, you could also use a third-party tool, such as Monster Insight, I think, is one of the more popular ones that I usually run into. But generally, just go install the plugin for, and I'll just walk you through it right now. What you want to do is add new, and just go ahead and type header. I think it's HEADAR. And this will go ahead and bring you over to header and footer managers. Now, you can see here that there's several here. This is the one that I have active. This is by WP Beginner. One of the things about plugins with WordPress, look for something that is at least 4 stars. Try to avoid anything less than that generally. Now again, that's just my choice, is also a good one here as well. And what will happen is once you install that, you'll go over to Settings, and then that should be available. Insert Headers and Footer. You'll see here's my global site tag. What you want to do is, instead of adding it in the footer, I'm just going to go ahead and paste it so you can see. That's essentially the same information. Basically here, you're going to add it over here. I'm not going to muck with my setup just so that I'm safe. But you go ahead and see it's really, really that simple. Go to Save. And that's all you have to do. Go back to your dashboard. Go ahead and view your site. Now, what you could do too is, if you know HTML, go over here and view the HTML properties and validate that the JavaScript is there as well. Then you go back to Analytics, and that's really about all you need to do. Now, it will take approximately, it could be up to 24 hours perhaps, before it really starts populating. Again, it's more of a process. Once you get started, you're there, you're good. So it will start populating every couple hours, every day. Again, it's not going to usually have any issues after you get the tracking code set up properly. With that said, let's go ahead and move on to the next module. Welcome to segment 2. In this segment, we're going to talk about some of the more advanced topics around making decisions with the data we obtained from Google Analytics. And then also I'll talk about certification. Now, we'll be focusing mainly on, in this specific segment, basically areas around analytics intelligence, customization of our data. We'll also talk about other tools such as URL Builder, DaVinci tools, real-time tracking, etc. We'll then talk about how we could use Google Analytics to help identify opportunities through SEO. I'll also be going through the major reports as well, and some tips, and provide you some insight into those. And then we'll go ahead and wrap up the course with certification options and learning resources. Let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover. Let's go ahead and talk about the real-time report. This is actually one of the coolest features, especially for a blogger or content creator, because when you post something, you can see, for example, how well people react to it pretty much immediately. For example, if you post something on LinkedIn, Facebook, Medium, wherever you go to post your content, you could see the immediate results pretty much from that channel or those channels that you post. For example, you could see that I posted a quick blog post on LinkedIn just a few minutes ago. Go over here to real-time report. You could see that, again, I'm getting some activity down in Florida, and then looks like Philadelphia, 2 users actually there, 1 in Jacksonville. And with that said, you could see that they're looking at the pages, and that's great. Came from LinkedIn. I just made a small post a few minutes ago. And then over the period of the day, you'll see that post, it tells you the number of page views. Again, this is really nice to see. Go over here to locations. Basically, most of the traffic has come from the US in that short amount of time. And then as far as, for example, traffic sources, tells you social, and then also look like there is some direct search as well. So that wasn't from the blog post. That was just people searching for some content on Google or another search engine. So that's what this report is really useful for. So I encourage you to take a look at the real-time report. Another thing about it too is you may want to, for example, close this out and you create a shortcut. This is actually sort of cool. This will go ahead and you create a templated report and customize it. And again, you may want to look at specific sources, specific keywords. This is something that really could be useful. Also, too, you could see desktop versus tablet here. Again, very useful report, perhaps the simplest to understand out of the rest. There isn't as much customization you could do with this, but when it comes to getting value immediately, the real-time report is absolutely amazing. You can see the content they're looking at, tells you again where they're coming from. Events. So events, basically, we could set up an event, and this is something that you'd want to set up, for example, for a pipeline or something like a click funnel or a funnel as it would be called. And again, you want to have for example, a promotion to sign up for a course. And again, this is something that I'd recommend you do on your site. And that way you could track how well people react to certain events, like a promotion, for example. Really useful capability. So you could see that the users dropped off. And again, really nice to see the activity. And then again, what you could do, post some more content, see where it goes, post a new video as well, whatever you're looking at. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next report. Let's go ahead and talk about the pre-canned reports that are available. Now, we covered real-time reports previously. Let's talk about audience acquisition, behavior, and conversions. Now, audience is exactly what it sounds like. This is going to tell you who is visiting your site, what they're doing, how they're getting there, what are the devices that they use. A lot of really interesting information. I could go over here to active users, and this will tell me the number of active users based over that period. And you can see here, this is 1 day. I go to 7 days, 14 days, and 28 days, which, again, very easy to review and confirm that it is actually growing, and that's what you'd want to see. When it comes to, for example, audiences, what you might want to look at here is go over and set up, for example, some interesting areas that you might want to look at. And this is where you want to probably set up a segment. But one of the things we could do is look at, for example, different dimensions. Recommended users. What about age? So age is pretty interesting to look at. And you can see here that this is broken down by age group. 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, and 18 to 24. You can see that the age group that seems to be coming more is going to be about the 24 to 34 age group. That's about 45% of the users. Interesting stat. And again, you could go ahead and look at, for example, the city, the continent. Let's go ahead and look at a country, for example. You can see there the ISO code for the country. Basically, India, the US, Great Britain, Britain, and Brazil, I mean, SGCA. Again, I'm not sure what some of these are. I'd have to double check. But again, really nice information. That's the summary. Now, if I go to site usage, break that down that way, you could see there that it gives me that information broken down as well. I could also, for example, go over here. Let's say I want to go look at a pie chart. And that'll break this down into a pie chart. I could also look at the pie chart and easily confirm, for example, again, different countries. Like 20% would be from India. Another 20% is from the US. So just by looking at that, I can tell that my audience, almost 40% or more, is coming from 2 countries. And that tells me that I might want to think about catering basically my discussions around areas of interest to probably technology in those areas. Now, again, it's probably going to be about the same, but for example, like in Spain or Brazil, they may not be so concerned about cloud. They may be more concerned about IT security. Again, these are things you have to learn over time to figure out what actually works and what doesn't. If I go over to demographics, again, this is another way I could break down the user base. You can see now I have a pie chart here. Not a pie chart, but I have a bar chart basically. And then over here is my pie chart broken down between male and female. Once again, nice information I could actually act on and figure out what's going on. Now, what about mobile? This is one of those areas that, again, it's really up and down. You just never know what the usage will be. Looking at this, almost 62% of my traffic is coming from desktop. 36% is from mobile. And then about 1.35% is from tablet. That is just some of the information you can gather from audience. Now, acquisition. This is where you really want to figure out what's working. Where are people coming from? If I go to overview, this is going to provide me information on top channels. I can see that almost 33% of traffic is direct. 29% is organic. 20% is social, and on and on. What's really nice is I've set up a goal, so that goal is basically going to highlight the social shares. So if I go down here, I could also go look at users. I didn't set up anything for conversions yet, but that's generally something you want to do when you start selling directly on your website. With that said, this is something over here you might want to consider as well, is look at the acquisition, the behavior. So the bounce rate, we know, is basically the amount of time that they spend on your website and how long they basically stay there. Now, basically, again, the bounce rate should be pretty low. You don't want it too high. For some reason over here, look, if you could see that, 4.76%. And again, that's not really probably very accurate, because with the bounce rate, for example, we generally want to see so basically, again, what is the bounce rate? The bounce rate is basically typically pretty confusing. And basically, the bounce rate, according to basically Google, is really the percentage of single page visits. So basically, if someone goes to the website and they only stay on that page, then that's not really considered an interactive session, and therefore that's really considered a single page visit. The percentage of visits, for example, when they leave, basically the landing page that they go to is considered the bounce rate. Now again, this is pretty low. I don't know if that's totally accurate, just because I don't have a lot of what I would call shopping carts or anything that people might want to look at, or funnels as of yet. That's something I'm adding as we speak. But what I wanted to point out is this is really important to understand, but it's not that important to understand until you really start driving enough traffic. It's really about user engagement is what the bounce rate's really all about, and trying to make sure that your visitors are actually on your website using the website. So for example, the bounce rate is this. If someone goes directly to my site and only looks on this page and they don't go to another page, then that's considered really a bounce. So that's a single page visit. Really, it's that simple from that perspective. Now, and then we have channels. We go over to channels and look at where people are coming from, what they are doing. We have the ability to view this in different charts, for example, to give us insight. You can see that 43% of the traffic is essentially organic. That's coming directly from a search engine. Now, tree maps are really cool in the sense that you go over here and actually highlight basically the different, for example, metrics that you set up. For example, pages per session. What is the users, for example? Did you have a goal accomplished? So tree maps can definitely provide some insight and just give you a different visual. Now, source and medium. This is going to tell you basically, again, where exactly are they coming from? Is it Google organic? Is it direct? Is it LinkedIn, YouTube, On24, another website, so on and so on? So again, there's a lot here that you could really look at and dive into. You could also go over here and look at, for example, AdSense. Now, I'm not actually using AdSense on this website. I just use it for YouTube. But again, if you're advertising on your site with AdSense, then that's great. E-commerce, I do have a goal, for example, set up. And again, this goal is going to just look at essentially the traffic sources. Over here with Google Ads, this is going to show me my activity with Google Ads. So you could see that over the last few months, I only ran a short little exercise, spent about $100 in that time frame basically, just to see how traffic will be driven to the website. And again, this gives you some great insight. For example, here, I could go ahead and look at and see that 100% of the traffic that is listed did come from, for example, the Google Ads. And then if I go over here to keywords, now this is, again, nice as well. You go over here and actually set up different keywords and see what people are actually looking for around how they're getting to your site. Now, there's a little work to get this set up. I'll talk about it in the SEO section. Search queries. Same thing here. You can see here that this is actually populating the different search requirements that people are typing into the search engines to actually populate basically what they're looking for, and then this is how they are finding me. Here's the hour of the day. For example, what is the best hour of the day to actually find my site? And then behavior. This is basically what people are doing when they get to your site. What are they looking at? What are they trying to find? Do they find it? Do they add something to the shopping cart, or do they not? It's all about understanding the behavior. Now, the behavior flow is actually pretty cool. You can see here that when I select that, that is telling me, for example, from this landing page or this page, where the next basically click they're going to. What is the first interaction? What is the second interaction? And you can see here that in this case here, when I look at this one, this web page, the beta exam, that they're starting at this web page about the beta exam DevOps. And then over here, it looks like they're flowing over to another exam page to look at that. And then it looks like they're going over to another beta exam web page. And again, that's really interesting to see what the workflow is. And to really sort this out, you want to go ahead and add a segment and actually maybe weed out each of these and just create a separate segment for the ones that you really want to look at. Site content. Basically what people are looking at. You can see that this is the number of page views. Now, unique page views, this is basically the number of page views that is by a user that is a unique user. It's not someone going to the website, clicking on the page twice. That's not considered a unique page view. Average time on the page is less than a minute. That tells me I need to really probably consider what's going on. Some pages, though, again, have more content than others, so the average might not be the best way to look at this. You want to look at what the different pages are and how long they're spending on the page and reading it. So I could tell that for this one here, for example, people are actually looking at it based on the length of the page. Again, a lot of great insight. Now, content drill down. What you might want to do here, you could see that, for example, they're looking at certain areas of content, cloud engineer, blockchain training, free practice exams. Yeah, you can't go wrong with free exams, it looks like. And again, tells you the page views, etc. I go ahead and break this down by week. And again, we do know that we could export this data if we want. We could share this as well. Again, a lot of great information. And then let's talk about conversions. Now, this is where we want to set up a goal, set up our funnels. Again, with that said, you go to Overview, and you can see that I have one goal set up, source medium. And again, that's just to identify traffic, the conversion rate. Again, I don't really have any kind of funnel set up, so it's not going to really be useful in my case until I do that. This is just one area that you want to look at. Again, if you have a click funnel, you're selling something directly on your site, this is really interesting. So to show you how useful it could be is, for example, you go to the demo account, go over to the Google Merchandise Store, go to the master view. This will populate with the Google Store data. And if I go to goals, you can see that they have some goals set up. And again, the value is assigned, the conversion rate, etc. Engagement, it tells you where the traffic's coming from. Also, too, what are the URLs of those goals? Tells you, for example, your info, that's where they collect information. The basket, the store, registration, success, payment. Again, nice information you can get from these different reports. As expected, you can customize these any different way that you want to. Look at pie charts. You could look, for example, here. Look at this table in this manner. You could add dimensions to it as well. Whatever you feel like, the world's the limit, really, in this case with Google Analytics. A lot of great capabilities. Let's move on to the next topic. Now, one area you might really want to look at is to create a segment. Now, what is a segment? It's basically a filter that we're going to apply to the reports. Now, one of the things about a segment is it can really help you answer some questions. Can help you identify where traffic is coming from, what cities provide you the most traffic, what landing pages are providing you the most return for your investment. What is the average session duration? What is converting? What is not? So to go ahead and create a segment, let's go over to Audience and let's go to Overview. And you can see here we have Add Segment. And also just be aware too, I could go to Acquisition, go to Overview, and I could add a segment. And basically, you could go ahead and add a segment to any of these reports that you want to basically filter down. Now, this segment here is all the users, but maybe I don't want to look at all the users. Maybe I want to go add a segment, and basically identify, let's say, organic traffic only. Or I want to identify referral traffic, for example. So in this case, I'll go ahead and identify referral traffic. I go ahead and select that. I could also, for example, import from gallery. Now the gallery is going to be basically templates that you could apply as well. I haven't found any to be really useful, but it could very well be in your case. So I want to just provide that insight. So I go ahead and apply. And now you can see that 27% of the traffic was actually coming from the referral traffic. So if I go back to overview and actually close that out, you can see that 27% is actually coming from referral traffic. Now, I could also, of course, go down and break that down even more. And it's all about what you're looking for and what you're really trying to identify from the data. For example, you might want to look at the languages people are looking at or what type of mobile devices. Go over here, create another filter like mobile and tablet traffic only, and then select that. And then again, you can see mobile and traffic, and this gives you an insight into that as well. And over here, you can see mobile traffic is about 37% of the users. So not too bad. That's about what you would expect. That is how you would create a segment. Let's go ahead and talk about analytics intelligence. Now, analytics intelligence is really a collection of features that use machine learning to help you get better insight into your data that's collected by Google Analytics. What we want to do is go over here. You can see up in the corner, basically the top right of the dashboard here, the console home, just select Insights. Now, this will bring us over to Analytics Intelligence. Now, there's really three areas that it focuses on. First is it gives you insight into typical questions that you might have. It also provides basically insight into your data. For example, it points out what may be obvious, but also maybe what might not be obvious. For example, it goes through and basically states, for example, about my bounce rate. And again, it just basically says that the forecasted bounce rate changed from 0.01 to 16.86%. And again, that's perfectly reasonable based on the fact it's a blog and I only post typically once a week or so not a surprise. With that said, I could go down here, for example, content analysis. What are the top pages? And what it's going to do is print out basically the answer to that question that I might have automatically. What this is really good at, though, is it can provide some really interesting modeling around goals and the quality of your sessions that the users are viewing on your site, essentially. When I say quality sessions or session quality, basically how interactive is it? Are you getting basically a good amount of users that are staying longer? A lot of things we want to look at, but it uses ML to provide that insight. And we want to be able to use this to build upon our audience down the road. Understanding user behavior. How long do they spend on my site? Average at 2 minutes and 42 seconds. Now, again, not great, but again, considering that I just started the blog, it's about 3 months ago, I think, not even. Not too bad. Again, it's just something new, and I just wanted to point out how you could watch your blog that you just started grow week over week over week, especially when you have content that might be of interest. For example, you could see over here that my session duration in the last week has gone up about 2 minutes and 42 seconds. Is what it is now. So it went up about 55%. Again, a lot of it is really based on the content. It's based on what people are looking for. Also, too, this this provides really good insight just in the sense that, again, if I don't post, I'm not getting the same number of users and I'm not getting people looking at the site. With that said, nothing new there. So we want to sum up analytics intelligence as a way that we could go get our answers basically provided to us through a question. Basically, where do I get this? Understanding trends. Also, too, geographic analysis, like where do they come from? This is actually really interesting, right? Provides basically insight into the top countries that the user base is coming from. Go over here, you can see here, ask a follow-up question. What are the trends for the country or percentage of users by country? And again, it tells me the trends that, for example, the US seems to be trending a little bit higher than India and the United Kingdom. Anyways, just a lot of good insight that you get. The second reason, again, is really around insight. And the insight, when I say insight, it's basically how the machine learning algorithm basically looks at your site performance and gives you that visual into how you're doing. What are the pages that are doing well, right? What could be improved upon? And then lastly, how are you converting your user base? What are they doing on your site? Are they going to convert? And this is really useful as well, especially if you're going to do e-commerce or something of that nature. All right, let's go ahead and move on. One tool you should be aware of is called Table Booster. This is another Chrome plugin that you might want to look at. And what it does is it provides you additional insight, especially when it comes to heat maps and bar charts, and allows you to compare these side by side. And again, nice little tool. It is a Chrome extension. Just go ahead over, add it to Google Chrome. And I already have it installed in Google Chrome, as you can see. This tells you more about it. And also, too, it also extends out to an Excel spreadsheet as well. So you can actually view the heat map in Excel, which is actually really nice. And to actually validate that you have that enabled, go ahead over here to the Table Booster. And you can see that that is now enabled. Now, if I'm going to do a lot of advertising, a lot of marketing, I'm going to create a pipeline, I'm going to do a lot of posting about, for example, a blog post, I may want to go in and create what's called a campaign URL. And you would do this with a tool called the Campaign URL Builder. Now, in this situation, what I've done is I've created a website URL to my website. And I could also, as well, specify the source, where it's going to come from. So, for example, this source, I'm going to post the link on essentially LinkedIn. And when I post it on LinkedIn and people click on the link from LinkedIn, I will be able to easily identify this link as LinkedIn in Google Analytics. And that's really the goal, is to help identify how well your campaigns are working. You may want to create another campaign for Facebook, for Snapchat, whatever is the source of traffic that you're looking at. You want to add some notes, for example, what this is for, so you could easily identify it in the reports. Campaign name. Again, in this case, I'll call it the blockchain sale. Campaign terms will be blockchain, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. And then content. This will have my company name in there, because that's going to help me distinguish my campaign content from others when it comes to the advertising. Then I could also go ahead and convert it to a short link. And I could also copy the URL and just go straight there as well. So for example, if I go and I put in the link, this brings me over to my home page. And again, if I want, I could go back here. And let's say I want to change that. I don't want to go directly there. Let's say I want to go ahead and advertise, for example, a free certification test. And when I do that, it's actually like an upsell because they're going to click on another link, hopefully, and purchase the full exam. And again, this is a way you could drive traffic to your website, offer free service, and then as a result, be able to have a funnel set up to basically upsell the prospective viewer or customer, client, etc. Whatever you may want to call your website viewers, essentially. So I go back here, and what I want to do, paste that in there, copy the URL. You can see it updates that automatically. I'm going to go ahead and paste that link in there. And you can see it brings everybody right to that web page. Now what I want to do is I'm going to go over to LinkedIn, and I'm going to simply post it there. And once that's up and running, I'm going to go start a post, and I'm going to put in a link. You can see there, it pops up that. I'm going to go ahead and say, free CBSA practice exams, get certified now, just as an example. And to increase your traffic, you really need to go in and add some hashtags. The hashtags really, in my opinion, have driven so much more traffic by selecting the right hashtags to basically add as part of that. So when I post that, I'll be able to come back and basically go into Google Analytics and go over to the acquisition, for example, go over to campaigns, go to all campaigns, and once I set up a campaign, this will start picking up that traffic from that specific source. So what I could do is I could go set up a new campaign. Let's go ahead and say referrals, referral traffic. That's already been set up actually, but I might want to add, for example, track some other information such as sessions with conversions, or I might want to track, for example, over here. When that's if you have like a ClickFunnels approach set up, that's more like a funnel segment, like someone starts adding something to the cart, but they don't finish. That might be something you might want to add. I might want to also add, for example, new users and create a report that would provide me insight into what people are doing from that specific campaign. And when I add that, you can see there's no real conversions yet because I just posted. But with that said, eventually I will start seeing, for example, the referral traffic that'll hit on that, sessions. Then down here, it'll also update with other relative information. So that's pretty much how you would set up a campaign. And then also do remember to set up your link as well with the link builder. Now, there's a tool that I found pretty useful. It's called DaVinci Tools. Now, even though Google Analytics has some great insight here, for example, if I go to the acquisition report, even though I have lots of great insight, there's still that possibility I'm not getting the view that I want, or I'm not actually going in and actually weeding out my own hits from my own home, for example, going to the web page. What we could do here is go to DaVinci Tools, and this is actually written by a third party. It's not directly from Google, and it tells you about the author of this Chrome plugin, basically, and how he got started. But this is a tool that you want to go ahead and install with Chrome. And I already have it installed, but I do need to actually turn it on. So what I want to do is go over to my Chrome extensions, and then I'm going to go to extensions and turn it on. And what I want to do is turn on the DaVinci tools. And basically it's just saying again, here's what I can do now. Some of it has been disabled because it requires more permissions. So I have to re-enable it. So basically it'll pop up, and again, you don't see it on screen, but it will probably pop up and update once you turn that back on, especially if you don't use it for a week or two or a month. Looks like this is just updated like not even 2 weeks ago from the time of recording. All right, so that's DaVinci Tools. Now, what you want to pay attention to, review this, and there is some information here you might want to check out on what can be enabled. So for example, allowing, for example, to collect errors, also to extension options. When I click that, this is going to talk about being a subscriber, so I could subscribe to additional benefits. I could also go here and reset all the options, so it'll remove that from cache. But here is the tool itself. So basically, when I go to analytics, I could turn on and off certain properties that I can add to the report. And this is for Tag Manager, Data Studio, Ads, and then Annotations is another newer capability that is available. This will go to a subscription approach eventually, is my understanding. That is DaVinci Tools. The last thing I'd recommend is to go over to the DaVinci Tools Chrome Web Store again. And down the bottom, they list, for example, the improvements they have made to Google Analytics, to Tag Manager as well, and Data Studio. Let's move on. Now, one thing you may also want to do is create what's called a goal. Now, a goal is really meant to help you decide what exactly the business objectives are. Basically, you're going to create a template, and then that template will help you identify the categories that you want to essentially track and maintain. For example, like destination, duration on a page views, an event. But basically, again, the way to set up a goal is pretty straightforward. You want to go over here to conversions, go to goals, go to overview, and you can see here that there is one goal that has been completed, source medium. There isn't any data yet, but to create a new goal, what you want to do is to actually go over to the admin panel, and then over here, make sure you select the proper view. That way you are on the proper website when you create it. Especially when you're managing multiple accounts, it can get somewhat confusing at times when going back and forth. What we want to do is go to create actually a view. If you want to create a new view, for a specific requirement, a business objective, you could do that. But if you just want to go ahead and create a goal in, for example, this account without a specific view, go over here to create goal. And you can see that there is, again, one goal there. I go here, create a new goal. And the goal is going to be template based. Now, there's a few options here. For example, you go over here and select, for example, place an order. That's when someone basically places an order on your website. Whatever that order is, an ebook, a t-shirt, whatever it is, that's the goal that you're going to select. So it'll pre-configure some basic information for you. Or create an account, or read reviews, live chat, update, engagement, for example, compare information, share, sign up, whatever that is, you go ahead and select that. Now you could also create a custom as well. And again, whatever you're looking at, you want to identify what that goal is going to be for. In this case here, let's go ahead and select Share Social, go Continue, and then we go ahead and say Event or a destination. So what we could do is actually when someone basically clicks on a link, we go ahead and basically send them to another page that says thank you if we want. Go ahead and identify page screens per session. A lot of different things. We go Continue. We can go ahead and assign a monetary value, basically a conversion value, really up to us. And then I go over here if there's more than, let's say, 10 page views per screen. Go ahead and save that. And that goal has been set up. And again, it's really simple to do. Now, the reality is you probably want to use this more in a e-commerce setting. This is where you'll really dive in and figure out what the goals are really providing you from an insight perspective. For example, the categories like, are you bringing in revenue, acquisition, inquiries? These are reports, to be honest, that typically customers would really like to look at as well. Now, there's also SMART goals. I didn't talk about those, but basically there are prerequisites, for example, to have a SMART goal. These are more automated in that sense. So just be aware that that is something that you could also consider. Now, when it comes to goals, I just want to mention one more thing. When you use a template, basically it's going to provide you the best fit. For example, if I go back here and go over to goals again, and you could always edit this, for example, when I go over here, it's going to, when I select one of these templates, it's going to provide us the best fit based on what is configured with Google Analytics. And again, that's generally what it will do. If you need anything that you need to have customized or special, go to Custom, and then go ahead and set that up, name that goal, put in the destination, and continue on and be more specific. For example, you might want to link it to a specific page, or you might want to specify, for example, an event, typically is maybe another thing you might want to do. With that said, that's how you would set up a goal. Let's move on. Let's go ahead and say that you want to set up an alert. And to do that, you want to go over to Customization, over to Custom Alerts. Now, we have a few things we could consider here. First of all, we probably want to, before we create the alert, decide on what we want to create an alert for. Let's say, for example, I set up a new campaign, and I know that that traffic is going to come from a specific country, or I know that it's going to come from a specific site, or maybe I just want to be alerted, for example, when there's so many page views or whatever that specific metric is that's of interest. I just want to create an alert. What I want to do here is go to Manage Custom Alerts. What I could do here is set up a new alert, name it. I'm going to call this the class alert. I'm going to then say apply it to whatever site and data that I want to collect. For example, I could select the ads profile, I could select all website data, YouTube data, raw data, I could do the master view, etc. So whatever I choose, I may want to select it. So I'll go ahead and select that site there, all website data on GCP Gurus. What I want to do now is select the day or the week, for example, that I want to set up that alert for. So I could set it up every day when it triggers, or I might only just set it up once a week, whatever I really prefer. I'm going to go over here and then select alerts, and I'm going to include any alerts, and it will send me an email when that actually happens. Now, another thing is I could go over here and just add another email. Now, why would I want to do that? For example, I might be managing 20 different analytics accounts, different WordPress sites, and I probably want to make sure I select the proper site and the proper email to send the alert to. On the other hand, if I'm managing 20 sites and it's just my sites, then it probably is fine to send the same email. Whatever that, reasoning that you have for managing multiple sites, that's great. It's up to you. You could set up multiple emails. Now, what I recommend, though, is label the information that you're sending to so that you could identify it easy. For example, if you're monitoring a campaign, put in the campaign. If you're monitoring basically page views, put in page views. Whatever that alert is, try to identify it with the label. I could then go all traffic. I could also, though, to be honest, you probably don't want to select all traffic. You want to really get down into what you're trying to identify. For example, what is the source? And then let's say if the source is less than or greater than or increases by, for example, go ahead and select that. So if it matches exactly, for example, or sessions in this case. So if I have more than 100 sessions, and then if it matches, let's just double check this. If it contains, for example, LN, like LinkedIn, you could see it picked up that value. So if it comes from LinkedIn and I get 100 sessions because of LinkedIn, I could set up an alert. So I go over here and save that alert. And there you go. I have that alert saved. And then what I'd want to do is go over to LinkedIn, make another post. And then once that threshold's basically exceeded, I would then get an email explaining basically that the condition has been met. It really is that simple. So let's go ahead and move on to the next module. Now, one of the things that you can do as well with Google Analytics is actually track your activity from YouTube in Analytics. Now, to do this is a multi-step process, but it actually could be worth your time by going over to Analytics. And you want to create, first of all, go over here. And what you're going to do is, I already have my account set up, but basically you create another account. So to do that, what we want to do is go to Admin, go to Create an Account, go ahead and put in an account name. I'm going to call this YouTube 2. And then go down here to Next. What we want to do is measure the website. And then what we want to do is put in the website. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in the channel. And I'm just going to copy and paste the channel ID. Paste that in there. And basically with this, I already had that in there. And then go create. And then you can see that there's terms of service. Go through and accept that. That's almost ready to go. Here would be the tracking ID that you'd want to copy and paste. Now, this is not the real one I'm going to use. I've already got it set up. I just want to walk you through how to do it. We could also connect up any site tags if you're using Tag Manager as well. And that is pretty much all that you would need to do on this end until we go back into the dashboard. So what we want to do now is go over to YouTube and then add the ID to the YouTube channel. Now to do that, you want to go to Creator Studio and go over to YouTube Studio. Now, there's a new version of this. I just generally, to be honest, I don't care much for this, so I just like to go use the Creator Studio, the Classic. And then once I'm over there, what you would want to do is go over to your channel and then select Advanced. And then with Advanced, you could see that you scroll down, and this would be your property tracking ID. And then you would just save that. And that's all you would need to do from a setup perspective. And that's really all you have to do. Now, that's from a setup perspective. Now what we want to do is go back to Analytics. We then want to go over to the account that we created. I'm already in my YouTube account. And you can go ahead and see that it already has some data. Now, when you first set up your account, it will likely take 24 to 48 hours to start populating from YouTube. So don't get too frustrated. It's not automatic coming from YouTube. And the main thing, too, that you want to think about is why would you want to use, for example, Google Analytics to look at your YouTube channel? Now, there's certainly some value here because we could generate reports. We could go ahead and collect that information. We go down here, for example, look at the acquisition report and actually figure out where the traffic is coming from. So the main areas, for example, is we want to track how users find our YouTube channel. We also want to find out how users basically interact with our YouTube channel per se. So for example, my channel, not so much other channels, but what they do. Do they click another video? Do they click, for example, one of the trailer videos? What do they do? Also, too, we could also track how users convert on our channel as well. For example, do they go ahead in and actually click any kind of information on our channel page, for example, in the description? We could also get demographics as well. So there's some value to using Google Analytics as well as YouTube Analytics. Now, the main thing that you probably don't want to use this for is it's not going to provide you any kind of what I would call deep insight into the videos. So it'll tell you where people are coming from. But if you really want to know, for example, what video is really what people are looking at, you want to go over to the video board here. And when it comes up, you'll see. So if you go over here to basically the video manager in the old Creator Studio, you go ahead and see that you can see the number of views here, likes and all that. And basically that's the insight you'll get from the YouTube video manager. You're not going to get this from analytics. So the main real reason to use analytics is to provide you some better campaign tracking, some better Google ad tracking, referrals as well. That's really the thing. So remember, we're going to use the YouTube channel tracking code so that we could use Google Analytics to be able to track how users find our channel, how they interact with the channel, do they convert, and any kind of demographic information. Let's go ahead and move on. Now, if you want to go out and prove your knowledge on Google Analytics, there's some options for you. Now, Google does have a partner certification. This is really meant for Google ad partners. You'll essentially get a badge once you pass the exam, and then you can go ahead and add that to your profile and use that on your business cards, etc. That information is here. Now, for most folks, the individual qualification is probably what you want to do. It is free online. There's no restrictions to it per se that I'm aware of, and you'll be able to complete the exam in about an hour. The link is here. Just go over to Skillshop and go ahead and sign up. And the link is right here. This is the individual qualification. You simply click the link, get started, take the exam. And also, too, for additional resources, there are additional classes here you take for free as well. All you need to do is just sign up and get started. I wanted to thank you for joining, and I really do wish you the best success on your blog, on your website, your digital products. Please do reach out to me if I could be of assistance to you. And once again, thank you for joining. Good luck.